The rappel tower was brutal repetition. Day after day of rappelling and fast roping, full kit, rucks, weapons, 20-30 feet of open air beneath your boots. It sat out in the training area at Hunter Army Airfield, deep in the woods, next to a wide open field, far from everything but the sound of rotors in the distance. That's where we built the foundation. But the helicopter, MH-60s, MH-47s, that's where everything was tested for real. Rotors thundering against your helmet, wind slamming your face, knowing one mistake could cost everything. One day on the tower, one of our guys came off the rope wrong, a short fall, 10, maybe 15 feet, the kind a suburban dad takes every December when he's up on the roof alone, stringing Christmas lights for the family. Ladder shifts just a little, and suddenly there's no warning. Nothing dramatic from the outside, not Hollywood. But he hit the ground with all that weight. Full kit, ruck, weapon, landed wrong, twisted just enough, and his ankle exploded, bone punching through skin, boot filling with blood, dust turning red around him.
We trained endlessly on the tower, building skills that saved lives in the helicopters. But one short slip, same height a dad falls every holiday season hanging lights, changes everything. Heavy gear or not, the ground doesn't forgive.
On paper, we had everything covered. A bird on standby, crew ready to go, hospital just minutes away by air. I was the medic that day. My medic bag at my side, spine board ready, Kendrick extraction device folded nearby, hair traction splints pre-staged in case a femur snapped. All the advanced gear in the world was sitting right there. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking about the helicopter, or loading him onto the spine board, or cranking the Kendrick, or pulling traction on a broken femur. I was thinking about the next 30 seconds on the ground, because if we didn't control the bleeding, stabilize the limb, keep him alive right there, that multi-million-dollar machine behind us was nothing more than a fast way to deliver a body. What saved him that day wasn't the hospital, wasn't the helicopter, wasn't even the spine board, KED, or hair splint. It was my medical bag that I grabbed instantly, and muscle memory drilled 1,000 times in training. And here's the truth that hit me hard. The same unforgiving physics that destroyed that ankle on a rappel tower at Hunter Army Airfield are waiting in your kid's skateboard crash, your neighbor's fall from a ladder, or a car wreck 2 blocks from your house. What I learned out there in those woods and on real missions applies directly to your everyday suburban life.
We had the bird ready, spine board, KED, traction splints, everything for the big injuries. But in that moment, none of it mattered yet. It was the next 30 seconds on the ground that counted. Control the bleeding, stabilize the limb, buy time. Because the same physics that hits on a training field.
I'm a former 161st SOAR flight and paratrooper medic, Desert Storm veteran, Afghanistan combat medic with the National Guard, spent years as an ICU registered nurse, and now I work as a family nurse practitioner. I've stopped bleeding on the battlefield, in the back of helicopters, and in civilian ERS and ICUS. I've seen what works and what gets people killed when seconds count. Now I live in the suburbs, raising my own family, and I see the same life-threatening mistakes over and over again. Not from soldiers, but from good moms and dads who think they're prepared. They buy a kit on Amazon, toss it in the trunk, maybe open it once to check out the shiny stuff. Then one bad moment hits. Power tool, kickback in the garage, car crash at the intersection, kid goes over the handlebars, and suddenly they realize that little bag isn't going to save anyone. So in this video, I'm going to show you the 5 IFAK mistakes I see suburban families making that can absolutely cost someone their life. And more importantly, exactly how to fix every single one so you're not kneeling on hot asphalt with blood on your hands wishing you'd listened sooner. One of these mistakes is responsible for more preventable deaths than all the others combined in my experience, on the battlefield and off. I'll save that one for last. Let's start with the most common trap.
All the advanced gear in the world was ready. The helicopter, spine board, KED, traction splints. But in that moment, it was the simple stuff that mattered most. A bag I could grab in seconds, and the training to use it before the bird even spun up. Because the same unforgiving physics hits everywhere. Your driveway, your
Mistake number 5. You bought a boo-boo kit, not a trauma kit. In the Army, we had 2 categories in our heads, annoying and you will die. Blisters, hot spots, headaches, minor cuts. Annoying. Arterial bleed, sucking chest wound, massive trauma. You will die. Unless somebody does the right thing fast. Most suburban IFAKs I see, they're built for annoying. Band-aids with cartoon characters, triple antibiotic, burn cream, tweezers for splinters, maybe some ibuprofen rolling around in there. That's fine for soccer games, absolutely useless when there's a pool of blood on your driveway. Here's what that looks like in real life. Let's run a simple scenario. Your teenager's riding a bike. Car doesn't see them at the stop sign. They go down hard. Handlebars punch into the upper thigh, right where that big femoral artery lives. You run out with your little white plastic first aid kit. You open it, Band-Aids, alcohol wipes, maybe some gauze squares that look like they belong in a dentist's office. Meanwhile, blood is pumping with the heartbeat. That's not wipe it and kiss it better time. That's you have about 3 to 5 minutes before fatal blood loss time. Your kid hasn't failed you. You failed yourself by packing for paper cuts instead of packing for war. A real IFAK is not a boo-boo kit. It is a trauma kit, built for the 3 killers: massive bleeding, airway and breathing problems, keeping circulation going long enough for that ambulance to actually matter. At minimum, I want you to have a proven real tourniquet, Cat Gen 7 or soft TT wide, Co-TCC recommended, hemostatic gauze or plain gauze to pack deep wounds, a pressure dressing to hold that packing in place, vented chest seals for penetrating chest trauma, nitrile gloves. Blood-borne pathogens don't care about good intentions. Notice what's missing: the 20 little Band-Aids and 10 mystery ointments from the pre-packed family first aid box. Those aren't evil. Just don't confuse them with life-saving gear. Here's your homework this week. Dump your current kit on the table. 2 piles: comfort, Band-Aids, creams, meds, and life-saving. Tourniquet, gauze, dressing, seals. If pile 2 is empty or tiny, you have a boo-boo kit and tactical clothing. Fix it now. That's mistake 5 fixed. But even with real gear, the next mistake can snap in your hands when you need it most.
Most families have a boo-boo kit for scrapes and blisters. But when a real bleed hits, like a femoral artery from a bike crash, Band-Aids won't cut it. You have minutes, not hours. A real trauma kit, tourniquet, packing gauze, chest seals, buys the time that matters. Don't pack for paper cuts, pack for war.
Mistake. Number 4. Cheap, fake tourniquets that fail under stress. Back on that rappel tower, we abused our gear. We cranked tourniquets down hundreds of times on real limbs and training aids. If something was going to break, we wanted it to break in training, not in the back of a helicopter over the mountains. Contrast that with what I see now. I open Suburban IFAKs and find tourniquets that look like the real thing. Same color, same shape, but the stitching is trash, the windlass is hollow plastic, and the buckle is already cracked from just sitting in a hot car. You know when that gear decides to fail? Not when it's sitting in the bag. It fails when you have a slippery, bloody limb in your hands and you're finally cranking down hard enough to matter. Let me be blunt. If you bought your tourniquet because it was the cheapest option on a random marketplace listing with blurry photos and no clear manufacturer, you did not get a deal. You got a prop. On the birds, our tourniquets were combat tested, manufactured to a clear standard, used and abused in training, replaced the second they showed weakness. For your suburban life, you need the same mentality. Buy from reputable medical suppliers. If the price feels too good, ask yourself, is this worth my kid's leg or their life? Here's a simple test at home. Take your real tourniquet, once you have one, put it on your own thigh over jeans, and time yourself. Can you get it on, above the knee, cranked tight enough that you cannot feel a pulse in your foot in under 30 seconds? If the strap rips, the windlass bends, or the buckle slips, that thing belongs in the trash, not on your loved one's limb. So that's how you avoid trusting your life to a piece of plastic cosplay. But here's the painful part. You can have perfect gear, real tourniquets, real gauze, real chest seals, and still lose someone because of the next mistake. You hid your IFAK where you can't reach it when it actually counts.
We abused our gear in training so it would break there, not when it mattered. Cheap knockoff tourniquets look the part until you crank them on a bleeding limb. Then the stitching rips, the windlass snaps, and time runs out. If you bought the bargain version online, you didn't get a deal. You got a prop. A real Cat 7 is built for abuse.
Mistake number 3. Your IFAK is buried and inaccessible. On missions, every second of movement mattered. Tourniquets weren't in the bottom of a ruck. They were staged, on the outside of armor, on the belt, on the bird, where any one of us could grab them blind. We assumed the moment we needed it most, we'd also be the most stressed, the most scared, maybe even partially injured ourselves. Now I walk through suburban garages and minivans and see the emergency medical kit stuffed behind camping chairs, buried under sports gear in Costco halls, or my favorite, in the house somewhere, my spouse knows where it is. Here's what that looks like when the clock is actually running. You need a hard standard here. In a worst-case scenario, if I blindfolded you, spun you around in your driveway, and yelled, "Your kid is bleeding," you should be able to move to your car, open one door, put your hand directly on that IFAK in about 3 seconds. Not, "I think it's in the back somewhere." Not, "Hang on, let me move this stroller and the groceries." 3 seconds. Here are 3 setups that work in real life. Vehicle seat back mount, trauma kit on the back of the driver or passenger seat, clearly labeled, visible from outside the car, same spot every single day. Garage on mudroom trauma station, wall-mounted bag or pouch, near the door most people use, at eye level, not in a box. Everyday carry mini IFAK, smaller kit in a backpack or purse, same pocket every time, stripped down to bleeding, airway essentials. Family drill. This weekend, tell your family, at some random time today, I'm going to yell "kit." When I do, you have to get it into my hand as fast as you can. Time them. Do it again. Swap roles. You'll be shocked how many seconds vanish because nobody actually knows where the life-saving bag lives. Now you've got real gear you can actually reach, but there's still a massive problem. I've walked up on people with beautiful trauma kits mounted perfectly, and they're frozen, staring at the bag, hands shaking, no idea what to do first. If you're still here with me, you're already ahead of 90% of suburban families. But don't click away yet, because the number one mistake I've personally watched cost people their lives has nothing to do with gear at all. Before we get there, we have to fix the next issue, thinking that buying the kit is the same as knowing what to do.
On missions, every second mattered. Gear was staged for instant access. In your home, it's the same. A buried kit costs lives when bleeding won't wait. Mount it where you can reach it in 3 seconds. Seat back, wall, everyday bag. Drill it with your family. Kit! Because when your kid is hurt,
Mistake number 2. No training, just gear. I want to tell you about Sarah. Not her real name, but I remember her face. Sarah was a teacher, drove a spotless Honda Pilot, the type who color codes her calendar and never misses a dentist appointment. One day she decided, I'm going to be prepared. She went online and did everything right. Bought a legit tourniquet, hemostatic gauze, pressure dressings, chest seals, the whole 9 yards. Honestly, her kit was better than what I've seen in the back of some actual ambulances. But there was one problem. She never opened it. No class, no practice, no dry runs. That bag rode around in her trunk like a magic talisman. If something bad happens, this will save us. Then her teenage son rolled his mountain bike on a neighborhood trail. He went over the handlebars. The end of that bar punched straight into his inner thigh, right where that big femoral artery lives. By the time Sarah got to him, there was blood on the pavement, and he was going pale. She did a lot of things right. She stayed with him. She called 911. She ran for her bag. She opened the kit and froze, tourniquet in her hand, but her brain went blank. Above the wound, but how far above? Tight. But how tight is too tight? What if I paralyze him? What if I do it wrong and make it worse? She grabbed her phone, typed how to use a tourniquet with bloody fingers, and tried to learn from a 3-minute video while her son's blood was already on the ground. He never made it to the hospital. It wasn't lack of love. It wasn't lack of gear. It was lack of training. Mistake number 2, no training, just gear. Here's the hard truth. Buying gear does not make you prepared. You don't become a pilot by buying a helmet. You don't become a chef by buying a knife. And you absolutely do not become a first responder by buying an IFAK. In the military, we had an ugly saying, you will not rise to the occasion. You will fall to the level of your training. If your training is 0, that's exactly where you will land when it's your kid on the pavement. Here's exactly what to do so you're not Sarah with the unopened kit. Stop the bleed class. Look it up in your area. Usually free or cheap. You will physically put a tourniquet on a limb until bleeding stops. One good online source. Pick one instructor or channel you trust. Watch one skill at a time. How to apply a tourniquet. How to pack a wound. How to use a chest seal. Pause the video. Practice along with your own gear. Monthly kitchen table drill. Dump your kit on the table. Pick one item. Tonight is tourniquet night. Everyone in the family practices putting it on a leg or arm. Time it. Switch roles. Reps under tiny stress. Have someone randomly yell, "You're bleeding, tourniquet, go." You grab the kit, apply it to their limb as fast as you safely can. Laugh about the awkwardness now, so you don't freeze later. Let's walk through this together. Imagine this is happening in your driveway. Your neighbor slices their forearm on a broken window. Bright red blood is pumping with the heartbeat. Step 1. You shout for someone to call 911. Step 2. You grab your kit from its known consistent spot. Step 3. Gloves on as you move. Step 4. Direct pressure right on the wound with gauze. If blood is still soaking through, you pack more gauze in, right into the wound track, finger by finger. If it's an arm or leg and it's still uncontrolled, tourniquet goes high and tight on that limb, strap through the buckle, pull all the slack, then twist the windlass until the bleeding stops. Not until it hurts enough, until it stops. Lock the windlass in place, note the time if you can, and stay with them until EMS rolls up. If you've practiced this even 3 or 4 times in your living room, your hands will know what to do before your fear catches up. Tonight, after this video, open your IFAK. Put the tourniquet on your own thigh, over jeans. Time yourself from hands off the kit to tourniquet in place and tight. If you've never done that before, you just found your first training gap. Do that once a week for a month and you'll be faster than half the people wearing uniforms. So that's mistake number 2. Thinking gear equals skills. Once you fix that, your odds of actually saving someone go way up. But there's one more mistake that can quietly kill your family even if you have perfect gear and solid training. It's the one I've watched cost more lives than all the other mistakes combined, and it comes from a very comforting lie most suburban families believe.
Sarah had the best gear. Real tourniquet, gauze, seals. But she never opened it, never practiced. When her son needed it, she froze. Gear without training is just expensive hope. Take a class, practice at home, build muscle memory.
Mistake number 1, assuming 911 will save you. When I left the military and started working as a civilian provider, I had to relearn something the hard way. Helicopters are fast. Suburban ambulances are not. We had a case, middle-aged dad, weekend woodworker. He was ripping a board on his table saw in the garage. Board kicked, hand slipped. The blade chewed up his forearm and nicked his radial artery. His wife heard him yell, ran out, and did exactly what most good people do. She panicked, grabbed a towel, wrapped it loosely, sat him in a chair, and called 911. Then she waited. What she didn't know was that their local EMS was already on another call, then got delayed by a train at the crossing. From first 911 dial to wheels in the driveway was almost 14 minutes. By the time they walked him into the ER, he was ice cold, gray, and empty of blood volume. He died because they believed help is on the way meant we can stop doing anything. They thought calling 911 was the finish line. In reality, it was the starting gun. Here's the part nobody wants to hear. Average suburban 911 response time in the U.S. is 8-12 minutes. You can bleed out from a major arterial injury in under 3 to 5 minutes. Traffic, weather, multiple calls at once, wrong address, apartment gates, all of that stacks up against you. Paramedics are good. They are not magic. They can't teleport. When something bad happens, your first responder is the person already in the room. That's you. Paramedics are second responders. If you live like the cavalry is always 3 minutes away, you're gambling with your family's lives. I'm not saying don't call 911. I am saying call 911 and start treatment immediately. Think of it like this. Your job, stop the big leaks. Keep air going in and out. Keep blood inside the person. Their job, bring the drugs, the extra oxygen, the monitors, the ride. If you expect them to do both jobs, you're setting everybody up to lose. Back on that tower with the birds spinning behind us, we had the ultimate 911 sitting right there. World-class pilots, trauma-capable helicopters, hospitals on standby. But the guys who lived didn't live because of the helicopter. They lived because someone within arm's reach had the right gear in the right place and the training to use it in the first minute. Your suburban life is no different. Your helicopter is the ambulance. Your medic is you. So fix the 5. Stop pretending a boo-boo kit is a trauma kit. Ditch the cheap fake tourniquets that will snap when it matters. Mount your IFAK where you can grab it in 3 seconds, eyes closed. Get real training until your hands know what to do before your brain panics. And never, ever assume 911 will save you if you're not doing your part in those first critical minutes.
This is survival. This is resilience. This
is Suburban Prepper.